Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Ask Android session. This time, we're focused on large screens. So if you have questions around the new 12L feature drop, building for large screens using Jetpack, designing for large screens using material design, use that live chat and ask us our questions. We can't wait to unfold all of these topics. I'm Freda Montanescu. I'm a developer relations engineer. And here with me, I have...
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Jacobson. I'm a product manager and Android developer, and I'm focused on making it easy for developers to build applications for all screens, especially large screens and foldables.
Hi, my name is Javier Lopez. I'm a designer in the material design team, and I've been leading the efforts on large screen guidance.
Hi, I'm Wale Ogunwale. I lead the Android Window Manager team as part of the broader framework team.
And I'm Chris Demiris. I'm co-founder and head of engineering at Lumafusion. We're really excited to be bringing our video editing app, Lumafusion, to all the incredible large screens that are available on Android and Chrome OS.
Cool. Thank you, Ron. So until you get started with asking us questions on the live chat, we'll start with some of the questions we got asked previously on Twitter. And the first one is, the large screen segment has existed in the industry for some time now. What new opportunities do you see? What new use cases or products? If I can start this one, I think what's incredible is actually the growth of Android tablet activations. So I think in the last year, it was like 100 million new Android tablet activations, which is a lot. And then we've seen, I think, over 250 million active large screen devices running Android. That's such a huge market that I think, you shouldn't miss out on building for that market. And now with the increased usage of foldables, it just increases the way you can build, the opportunities you can have of expanding your app beyond the phone factor. Anyone else wants to add some more things?
Well, we're also
I think. Please, Chris, you should go first.
I'm just going to say that we're really excited, honestly, by Chromebooks, just because that gets us into the educational market where those are so important, and that's a really nice area for creative tools like Lumafusion.
It's just about that bigger screen, right? Bigger real estate.
Yeah, our app is definitely built around its best use cases on a large screen because there's a lot to do when you're editing a video.
Javier?
Yeah, from the design perspective, what was interesting about considering a large screen device is that, yes, of course, they've existed for a long time, but what was unique about specifically the foldable is this idea of going from transitioning from an app that may look like a regular phone to something that is much larger. So that really opens up the opportunities for designers to fit in more, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to put more content inside or like jam pack the screen, but instead it was really good opportunity for us to introduce different functionality or even displaying elements next to one another. And the other thing that is that we identified as a really big opportunity for anybody that is transitioning into these is that there's a lot more opportunities for multitasking, and users are confronted with more complex tasks in their everyday lives. So these devices really are good opportunities for us to like start thinking about what may your app look like next to one another, how can your app work with another one, or even how may you think about like the transition between all of these postures in the device or even on a tablet.
We can go then to the next question. What optimizations do developers need to consider for large screens? What should developers think of? Daniel, do you want to take this one?
Sure, that's a great question. So I think it's a bit of a mindset shift where traditionally you're thinking about building an application that's probably just going to run on a typical candy bar phone style device to thinking about how your UI can run no matter what the size is. So obviously large screens are important, but I think one statistic that blows my mind is the 7x increase in multitasking on foldable devices because of the larger screen real estate. And when an end user is using those applications, they can resize it to be whatever they want. And so really just consider how your application will scale no matter how it's being used. And so more obviously that's very vague and philosophical. Getting into more specifics, we're trying to make it easy for you. So we have the new window size class viewport breakpoints, where you can really think about 3 width-based breakpoints. If you optimize your layouts for those, you'll have some assurance that your application is going to run great in most use cases. And then obviously we have foldable postures where you want to think about advanced layout support and things like that. But maybe I could pass this one to Chris as well, just to talk about what sort of layout optimizations Lumafusion has made.
Well, the first time I got to try a foldable, it was really exciting because we started by capturing some video in the folded mode like a phone, and actually started editing right there in Lumafusion. Then flipped it open, and suddenly we have the full real estate of Lumafusion to be able to do more and do more easily. And we even have users who multitasking is a great opportunity here. We have users who have use cases where they might have a script or something else they want to have up while they're using Lumafusion, and this suddenly gives them more real estate to do that. And so it's quite a nice opportunity.
Yeah, so when I think about optimization, is also think about if you're using a foldable, right? Your users are using the app with the device folded, but then when they unfold the device, you have to make sure that you have this nice app continuity and ensure that your app displays and looks nice as well. And similar, if I'm not mistaken, starting with Android 12, apps run in multi-window mode. So then it's just, I think Javier was talking about multitasking. It means that you have to think about your app being able to be resized pretty much at any time. So how would you be handling this? I think these are some of the optimizations you have to keep in mind.
I totally agree with. Sorry. Yeah, I totally agree with the points you're making. I think for a long time, a lot of apps have been developed for phones, and phones are normally in portrait mode. And once you start transitioning to a larger screen, landscape is very important. So one of the very few things you can do to support large screens better is to make sure your app looks good in landscape mode. And if you have that covered, the next good thing would be resizability, making sure your app supports resizable activity flag, so that as it transitions from different screen sizes, it still looks good. Javier?
I think Wale said it very well. And adding on to that, the other thing that we identified as a key opportunity is navigation, right? So some of the navigation components on Portrait are optimized for the candy bar, right? Like they want to sort of stay docked to the bottom of the screen. In foldable devices or even in larger devices, that's not really the case anymore. Users are actually holding the device with 2 hands most times. So that means that the navigational components most likely are better positioned on the edges of on the sides of the device as opposed to on the bottom. So and another key thing that I would advise for anybody looking into doing this is really thinking about what we call the banding effect, right? Like on the candy bar, there's a whole bunch of components that extend from or elements that extend from edge to edge of the device. Which makes sense, right? It's a portrait mode, like Wale very well said. But on a tablet, then all of a sudden, things that extend from edge to edge are take up a lot of space, and they're very noticeable. And sometimes they actually can make it feel clunky. So make the UI feel clunky. So in that case, what we recommend is really trying to undock things from edges and think about other ways in which we can position your components and elements as well.
What's the easiest way for developers to optimize the application's UI for all screen sizes?
Yeah, I can try to take that one first, but then I'll probably hand it off to Wale as well. So you kind of had different options, and there's no single answer to this. It depends on where your application is today and what your future plans are. So for example, if you have an existing application based on multiple activities, well, with the 12L feature drop, we now have activity embedding for you to place multiple activities being displayed at the same time side by side. So that's a great way for you to optimize your application without having to rewrite all of your layout code and rewrite your entire application. We've also seen some promising results with Jetpack Compose as a new way to easily build resizable UI. So if you're considering rewriting a part of your UI or your entire application, Jetpack Compose is a great option that makes building resizable UI easier to do initially, easier to maintain in the long run, and things like that. So it really just depends. But just stay on top of all the news that we're announcing. We just announced a whole bunch with the Android Developer Summit, and more is coming soon. And maybe Wale can talk a little bit more too. Like there's also compatibility modes if you really don't want to do a whole lot, but I'll hand it off to Wale as well.
I think plus one to everything you said, Daniel. If you're looking to optimize, those are the first things that I would highly recommend somebody look at, especially Compose. The other options, there are some apps that have mostly been built around activities, and it takes time for them to migrate to things like the various layouts we want. With that in mind, we've built the activity embedding infrastructure in Window Manager Jetpack that allows you to have multiple of your activities on screen at the same time, mimicking some of the layouts you find in other Jetpack libraries. On top of that, we've added lots of compatibility mode to make things easier for you. The compatibility modes don't offer the ideal experience for the user. So even though it makes it usable, it's not the best experience they could be getting out of the app. So I highly encourage you to look at some of the other tools that Daniel mentioned.
And I would also add, just go to material.io. We just published a whole bunch of guidance around this, and we're hoping that it can be helpful in your journey on adapting.
Thank you. Next question from the live stream. Should I use bottom navigation on a tablet or foldable? And actually, we got another one also related to navigation. So I think it would be great to discuss around a little bit about, okay, how do we handle navigation? I think both from a design and maybe also from a developer perspective. So I think I'm going to start with you, Javier, because I think the initial question was around design.
Sure. This is a question that we get often, and I was actually hinting at it earlier. One of the things that we're recommending is that we transition the component, the bottom navigation component, into a navigation rail. A navigation rail serves a similar purpose in the sense that it has multiple destinations that are principal destinations within the application. And the idea of this is that we actually are positioning our components on the edges of the device. We think that placing navigational components on those edges are easier to reach to, and especially for people that frequently move around the application. The other thing that is important is that when it comes to secondary navigation, is really kind of a tricky one, right? Like so. In a mobile device, we may see things like tabs or even segmented buttons as things that we can use to actually have a secondary level of navigation, and those still apply in foldable devices, so they can still be used in combination with the navigation rail.
Cool. And in terms of how you would do that, you have multiple options. So in the talk actually immediately preceding this AMA, we went through two examples, one with views and one with compose. For a views-based application, you can use resource-qualified layouts. You could have a kind of compact, narrow layout using bottom navigation technologies like a bottom app bar or a bottom nav rail, bottom nav menu, sorry. Or you could then use a navigation rail for wider layouts. Another thing to think about is how this maps to design guidance. And so rather than having to guess, like what is the breakpoint for when you go from compact to the next thing, like when you should actually do the switch, we now have the window size classes and guidance. So for compact layouts, you should use a bottom navigation menu. And then for medium and above, you should consider using a navigation rail, because that's when the user is likely going to be using the device with two hands instead of one.
Yeah, so we have, when we talk about window size classes, we have, like compact, medium, and expanded. And I think these are breakpoints that we end up using both in our guidance, in design guidance as well, but also in our tooling, right?
Yep, tooling and samples, you'll see it everywhere. Go ahead, Javier.
And I would also add to the window size introduction and on the design side that it's been super helpful for us to actually decouple the use of a navigation of window size from breakpoints, right? And the idea behind this is that, as Daniel actually very well explained it to me in a conversation a while back, was that like the window sizes are really helpful for triggering device component adaptations and transformations, but they're not necessarily helpful for grids or the rest of layout. So when it comes to things that people are used to correlating, say breakpoints, like grids, like the amount of columns, like margin values, those are still available, but they're just not joined to the decision of the window class. Instead, they actually just depend on the size of the screen that you have in front of you. so that way we can actually start to make smarter decisions as far as like what components get surfaced when automatically.
I think actually your answer kind of ties in with the next question we have, which is, what are the differences between the 12L tablet and desktop device class/reference types? What bucket would detachable Chromebooks like the Duet fall into? Yeah.
Sure. So the device classes or the reference types, I think you're talking about some of like the reference devices that are coming in Android Studio. And so those are supposed to exercise different kind of layout states and breakpoint combinations. So the tablet reference device demonstrates what a medium height and expanded width device would look like in landscape, whereas the desktop would be expanded height, expanded width. And that's really just thinking about screen sizes. So one other thing that you need to think about when considering detachables, especially and desktop device types, is input. And a lot of times with these larger tablets or larger detachable desktops, you may have a stylus. And then you also, if it's detachable, that kind of implies you can also connect it or attach it to a keyboard. And so you should consider keyboard optimization, stylus optimizations, mouse, things like that. And there's actually a talk about that. One of our coworkers, Emily, did an input for all talk that I would highly recommend watching if you're curious to learn more about some of those optimizations. So it's a different type of thing. So there's layout and then there's input, and both are important, especially as you start thinking about larger screen devices.
Actually, Chris, I'm curious. So what did Lumafusion do? Did you folks do anything separate for these device size classes?
Well, we actually didn't, and we'll probably be taking advantage of some of the newer things soon. But what we did is really looked at the app in the term of fragments, and we did started with just two basic layouts: a portrait layout and a landscape layout. And our app really works towards that, where we have the library, the viewer, and the timeline, and those have to be related to each other. So just using a constraint layout to arrange those, and then within those fragments, doing basic simple layouts of the individual elements and treating those as almost separate apps that are their own resizable apps. And by doing that, it really simplified just the concept of it. So no matter what we do already, it was working quite well. And then when we started looking at foldables, it's just a matter of looking at where is that occlusion area and moving our controls, and our constraints to, accommodate that. And now we're even looking at some things of what could we put in that occlusion area that would be interesting, like maybe metadata for the current selected clip and things like that. So there's, again, some fun opportunities to add some more data that in a normal space that you wouldn't normally think something should be there. So
maybe I can actually give a bit more information on some of the things that you mentioned, because I know when I started working with foldables, I didn't really know what is that occlusion area that you're talking about. And I also think about postures. What are these postures? So I think when we talk about foldables, you have multiple postures. You can use the device folded, unfolded, but also in something that we call tabletop mode. So when the device is half opened. So these are all our postures. But then when the device is in something like tabletop mode, then you have parts of the screen that can be occluded, right? That are not touchable. And therefore, those are areas where information like metadata that you just mentioned, Chris, would be great to be displayed. And actually, also, this goes into the next question, which is, how can I handle foldable postures like tabletop mode? So now that we said what these postures are, who wants to talk about how to handle them?
I guess I can. Oh, go ahead, Wale. I was hoping you would.
So we have a Jetpack library called Window Manager Jetpack, and that has all the tools you need to handle various postures. We actually just went to beta, I think, within the last few weeks, so that's pretty exciting. We've been working with the industry for a couple of years now to finalize and to polish the API surfaces for all the foldable devices. As you all know, it's been kind of crazy, a ton of foldable devices of all shapes and sizes. And it's been also exciting, and it was a little bit of a challenge to get our API surface to be able to cover every single case. And now that we're in beta, we feel we're in a really good place. And y'all give it a try. Give us feedback, and we can always make it better.
Yeah, I think we're at beta 03, and then I'm hoping for a stable release soon. But yeah, I know we can't promise, but it's hopefully we're getting close to a stable release.
Fingers crossed.
Cool.
I would also add that when it comes to postures, it's very important for people to consider not only the fact that components may actually just transition into their new this larger device, this larger screen size. But especially when we go into tabletop posture, we actually do need to take a special care of the UI by, say, placing key actions or most actions at the bottom of the screen, and then most consumption, components that would actually effectively be for consuming content on the adjacent screen. The idea behind that is that, like, as a user may actually have something in tabletop mode, which is similar to how a laptop would actually look. Then tapping on the screen, on the vertical screen, actually makes the sort of jiggles the phone, right? And same thing, the camera is actually positioned in that side. So if you actually would be to place anything where you need to look at a camera on the bottom of the device, and it renders it kind of impossible to see. So those considerations are very important to take, especially when we actually think about the ergonomics of actually changing a posture.
I know we're talking a lot about guidance here. I just want to remind that we have all of these guidance out there. So when it comes to design guidance, I think that's on the material.io website. And then when it comes to building, to the implementation, then on developers.enter.com, we've actually recently updated a lot of our docs to provide guidance on how to build for large screens, both using views, but also compose. And then when it comes to building for foldables, we actually have a code lab that allows you to actually do some hands-on work and try out all of these window manager APIs. Cool. Next question. On devices like Chrome OS, where the user can resize a window from compact all the way to expanded, it is jarring for the user to have the navigation switch from a bottom to side rail.
I guess I can start, and then I'll look to Javier for some design support as well. I mean, I think if you think about this more generically, just in terms of resizable apps, like, it might be a bit jarring for that transition for a second. We are working on ways to actually smooth the transitions as well, but then you actually produce just a better user experience in that new layout state, and that's really what's important. Is like, whenever you have the given screen size or the available real estate, like, what is the best user experience you could provide? Another example is a foldable with an outer display. You have a small outer display, and that will almost guaranteed have a bottom navigation bar, because it's like a typical phone. And then when you unfold it, it will probably have a navigation rail, because it's going to be a bigger display. And we haven't seen that to be jarring or atypical. Like, people, you seem to pick up on it right away, and it's great. But maybe there's some design research that has gone into that as well. Javier?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, one of the key issues that we found is that if we did not do that, then we were actually sacrificing a user experience by keeping these navigational components on the bottom. So we have actually tested quite a bit on the motion of opening and closing or sort of expanding a screen and contracting it. And the thing that we're realizing is that, yes, it is a noticeable transition. But once people actually get into the new context, and it works the same. The other part is that, yes, of course, it's going, the moment that it happens, it may actually be jarring, especially if you keep changing it. But the majority of our users actually don't necessarily change the screens, the sizes of their screens as much, right? Like, so typically you may actually go one or twice, but that's not necessarily a thing that people continue to do on like, say, every minute or so.
Yeah, we find, with Lumafusion, users resize the window when they want to do a different kind of workflow. For example, when they do want to put something next to it for, let's say, looking at a script. And so it's going to be a one-time change. They'll stay in that mode for a while and then switch back. And the context switch of the UI is actually good in the sense that it leads them to, a different workflow that they're working on at that point.
What are the trade-offs of using the new 12L activity embedding versus alternate ways of building larger screen apps? Is there a preferred architecture when starting from scratch? Wale, would you like to start talking about activity embedding?
Definitely, excellent question. The main reason we're invested in activity embedding is to help people that already have existing apps based around activities. If you're starting from scratch, I highly recommend looking at some of the other Jetpack libraries like Compose. They offer excellent foundations to build you up for this environment and a ton of other environments Android runs on. If you have an existing app that uses a ton of activities and you would like to make it look better for larger screens, activity embedding is an easy way to do that.
Yeah, if I can add to that, because of activity embedding, you also don't need to re-architect your app, right? Because you already have, let's say, multiple activities. So activity embedding just allows you to display multiple side by side. So it's easier. But if you actually already use fragments, or hopefully you already use Compose in a single activity app, then don't use activity embedding, but rather I would say check out the build UIs for any app. I think the talk that Daniel and Clara gave, and also our guidance to see how to implement it.
Just a quick add-on to that is we have different solutions depending on where you are in your app journey. Some apps have a ton of legacy code and they've been building up their app for years and they have multiple activities. We don't want to exclude you from being able to easily support these different devices. So like we're targeting new solutions and technologies no matter where you are. But like Wale mentioned, Compose is obviously where a lot of our current investment is going, and it's the modern UI toolkit for Android. And so if you're starting from scratch, that's a really great place to start.
And our last question on Chrome OS, but I think this might apply for general large screens, not just Chrome OS. When my window resizes, how do I make the components of my app move smoothly to the new dimensions? So not just the navigation rail, but all components.
So that's like I mentioned. Oh, go ahead, Javier.
Oh, no, I was going to say that like this would be a really good plug for Material.io. We have actually added some guidance in terms of motion with some transitions that are default transitions coming from our motion subsystem, which should be useful in this regard. We have paid a special attention to foldables because they are the places where we see the majority of these transitions. Obviously, this applies as well to Chrome OS. But one of the key things that we're finding is that as people actually move their devices or transition from one state to another, it's usually important for us to keep at least one element that helps people sort of situate or understand the context in what's changing and what's not. In our case, we've been playing a lot with sort of components like, say, search bars or the position of our fab, which tend to be almost like landscape sort of signifiers within the app, and those are very helpful to target. The other part is that what is possible from the motion system actually makes it really useful, so that in this case you can actually just sort of plug and play and start using it.
Cool.
Just to add to that, from the technical side, on the order view system or toolkit, it's a little bit difficult to have those kind of transitions to be smooth and to cross configurations lines and whatnot. It's a whole lot easier on Compose, and if you're starting from scratch, you have the opportunity to use Compose. This is one of the areas where it's actually significantly more powerful and beneficial. Well, I was still looking at the order toolkits to see if there are things we can do there to also improve these smoother transitions.
Cool. I'm afraid we have to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for watching and for asking questions. Yeah, and happy Android Dev Summit. See you all soon.